monetizing digital services since 2004, boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG, where innovation meets monetization.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Kevin Palmieri about overcoming fear and fostering confidence to reach your full potential. Kevin Palmieri, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
John, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat, my friend.
Wonderful to be with you. I'm excited to have a nice conversation. You're joining us from New Hampshire. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about overcoming fear and fostering confidence to reach your full potential. Now, of course, this has application in our personal lives, our family lives, home lives. But we're also going to address it, particularly from an organizational perspective. And as a leader, how do we lean into the messiness and the discomfort and the uncertainty of leadership roles? How do we overcome the fear associated with those roles and foster confidence in an authentic way so that we can best lead our people and support them and help them to fulfill their own potential, which in turn will help us to fulfill our own potential. That's what we'll be discussing together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Kevin's bio with everybody. Kevin Palmieri is a motivational speaker, personal development coach, and entrepreneur. He is the co-founder of Next Level University, a company focused on helping individuals and organizations reach their full potential through coaching, training, and events. And I could go on, but I'm going to pause there. Anything else, Kevin, you would like to share with the audience by way of your background and personal context before we dive on in?
Yeah, one thing I always like to add is I might seem like somebody who is very confident. I might seem like somebody who designed the life I have today, but I have my own fears. I have my own insecurities. So me talking on this is very personal and something that I deal with often. I don't want people to think I have it all figured out, because the second you figure something out is the second you stop learning. So I think I'd like to add that as well.
Yeah, and that's a good disclaimer at the beginning, and I would say the same thing. I think we all have these things. It's a constant journey. It's a constant battle in our confidence, in our approaches, dealing with our people and dealing with the messinesses of organizations. And so I think ultimately, as long as we're aware of that and have the intellectual humility to foster that kind of a perspective, that will go a long way as we try to bring our authentic selves to this kind of conversation.
Yeah.
So why don't we start by talking about really how you look at fear, because we're juxtaposing fear and confidence. I'm not sure that's actually always the perfect way to view it, though that's commonly, how we think about it. So tell us a little bit about your thinking around fear, overcoming fear, and the connection with confidence in our personal lives and in the workplace.
Yeah, when I remember the first speech I ever gave, I used this example. I said, for many of us, we create this fence and we call that fence fear. And there are many things on the other side of that fence that we imagine we would like. But for some reason, we walk up to the fence and we convince ourselves that we can't step over it. And for many of us, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's our own boundary that we created. Nobody told us we would or we should be afraid of certain things. I mean, yes, some things. Don't touch the stove, it's hot. Don't jump from there, it's too high. But my thought process, John, is so many of our fears are manufactured. And here's what happens. When you create a fear for yourself, you say no. So I am not the type of person who is a speaker. I am afraid of speaking. Okay, interesting. The next time you get the opportunity to do that, you're not going to do it. Therefore, proving to yourself through the most recent and relevant proof that you're not the type of person who does that. And in a leadership role, it's very similar, where if your fear is giving somebody feedback or your fear is being vulnerable, every time you have the opportunity to do that, you're voting against that by saying no. And that, I think that's why fears get so deeply ingrained, is because we don't have any proof to the contrary. Quite the opposite. We have so much proof to the fact that we're not capable of doing it. So anytime I'm thinking of fear, I try to have that real conversation with myself of, is this actually logical, or is this an emotional thing that I've created that I've decided is now reality? And just one last example, John, I want to be a world-class international speaker. I was terrified of planes. It's going to be very hard for me to speak internationally unless I'm going to take boats and, however I'm going to get there. I had that realization that all I really have to do is get on the plane. After that, my job's done. I'm not flying it. I don't chart the course. I can just sit there for 2 hours. If I'm anxious, that's one thing. But understanding that fear that wouldn't allow me to step on the plane, once I step on the plane, that fear is transferred to something else. I think that's just an important understanding.
Yeah. So managing kind of our role in what this basis for fear is, I think, is what I'm hearing you say, and which is very foundational if we're going to try to overcome it, because there are certain things that are within our control. There's certain things outside of our control. And oftentimes we conflate a lot of those elements that, in fact, not only are not in our control, but there are experts, there are people, like in your plane example, there are other people that are fine. Like you don't need to worry about it. And you can't just tell someone not to worry about something. I get that people have their concerns, and they're deep rooted. But for me, myself, if I can recognize those things and I can take a step back and I can acknowledge that I'm just one person amongst a team of people all trying to help us be successful. Everyone has that goal in mind. That can take a lot of pressure off. And when you reduce that pressure, that allows you to address the root causes of the types of fears that you're facing.
Yeah. And then, so how does that connect? And to your point, is it always connected to confidence? No, because you can be confident and still be afraid. I think that's just a human element. But okay, think of it this way. We'll just stay on the plane analogy just because we're kind of taking it. If you want to become more confident when it comes to something, there are a couple ways to do it. It's through behavior and practice and proof, or in some scenarios, it can be through awareness. When I started to become aware of, why do the planes power down their engines after we take off? Is something wrong? Like, why does that always happen? Oh, that's normal. My awareness is raised. So for a lot of people, I think that confidence can be created from reverse engineering an outcome. Where, are you confident you can make an omelet? Yes. Why? Because you've done it before. Are you confident that you can put out a fire? No. Why? There's a lot of perceived fear, and I don't know how to do it. I've never done it before. I think at a simple level, for many of us, confidence is the ability to figure something out. It's the ability to say, can I actually get this result that I want based on my current awareness of what that result will take? But I think for some reason we say to ourselves, I'm not confident enough to do this. When in reality, I think for a lot of us, it's not certain. I'm not certain enough, or I'm not competent enough yet to put myself out there to try to get this result.
Monetizing digital services since 2004. Boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG, where innovation meets monetization.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize, as leaders, sometimes we have this sense that we need to project confidence constantly in order for other people to take us seriously. And now, certainly, you can't meander around completely clueless and unaware of what you're doing, and that can't happen. That will foster distrust and will hurt your credibility. But assuming that, that's not the situation we're dealing with most people. Most individuals don't know everything. And in fact, their team appreciates them acknowledging that they don't know everything, and bringing appropriate levels of vulnerability to your leadership style is not a lack of confidence. It actually, I think, requires a higher level of confidence, and self-assurity and security in yourself to be able to allow other people in to see that kind of vulnerability. Now, I'm not talking about oversharing and things that would be inappropriate in the workplace, but being appropriately vulnerable with your people and letting them know that you don't know everything, letting them know that you're leaning on them and their expertise. In fact, it is the expertise of your team that's going to do most of the work, not you as the leader of that team. And that actually can create a dynamic of increased trust that will allow other people to feel empowered and to do more great creative work, if you can foster that kind of vulnerability. So it's an interesting thing to think about, kind of the traditional sense of what people, this traditional stereotype of a confident, bold, confident leader versus the more modern conception of an empathetic leader, a leader who has that appropriate vulnerability and who can connect on a real authentic level with their people. And I think actually the two should go together. Like you come across as more confident when you can be genuine and authentic.
Yeah. And I'll throw this could be a wrench into things, but I think we should explore as humanity, as leaders, as everything, the connection between belief/confidence and self-worth. Here's the interesting thing. Oftentimes, I think when we meet somebody who is arrogant, we assume they have a ton of belief in themselves. When many people I have met that are arrogant, they're just delusionally high when it comes to self-worth. They think they're deserving of results, or they think they're deserving of attention. That's a very interesting thing where I think true confidence, to your point, is the ability to say, hey, I do not know it all. I don't know what I'm doing in this moment. I need some support. Or I'm afraid that things aren't going to go the way we want. I need to lean on somebody. I think that the confidence, that's confident. That is having the ability to say, I don't know if I can get this outcome, but I do know that I can share with you that I don't know how to get this outcome, therefore us getting the outcome. Versus somebody who might have a delusionally high level of self-worth that does kind of hinge on that arrogant side of things. I just think that's a very unique thing, because there's many people out there who don't think they're confident. They don't think they believe in themselves, when in reality, they have low self-worth. So they don't think they're deserving. There's a big difference between saying, I believe I can build the castle, right? I have confidence that I can build the castle, and I deserve to have the castle, even though I don't know how to build it. Those are two different lives, two different leaders, and two different teams.
How does that connect to imposter syndrome in your experience? Because that seems like that comes back to this idea of self-worth. And it seems like a connection point between fear and confidence and how we portray ourselves and the beliefs that we have in ourselves.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, imposter syndrome is your fear that people are going to find out your greatest fear. So it's almost like as a leader, if you're afraid that people are going to, you don't believe you know enough, your biggest fear around being an imposter is that everybody's going to figure out you don't know enough. One day there's going to be a spotlight that says, oh, today's the day, Kev, you do not know everything that you claim to know. So this is my perspective on that. I don't know if imposter syndrome is ever supposed to go away in a way, because if you're growing, if your company is growing, if you're growing as an individual, as a leader, you're probably always going to be hinging on in the learning zone where I know, but I don't know everything. I don't feel like I know enough. I'm in that outward zone where things could go wrong. I think as you become more confident and as you become more aware and as you become more certain, you probably should push the pedal down a little bit more and kind of lean out into your outward edges. So I don't think imposter syndrome is lack of confidence. I think imposter syndrome is you getting to a new area of life, understanding the lack of familiarity with that area, and then thinking of all the things that you don't know because you don't know what you do know yet. I think that's kind of what imposter syndrome is and how it shows up for many of us, because it's not because we don't know. It's because we're very new to the area that we're in. When you get a promotion, you've probably been working for that promotion for however long, and that was the goal. When you get there and maybe you're leading a new team, what are you thinking? Well, maybe I don't know as much as the previous leader. Maybe I do things completely different. Maybe I'm missing things, right? You're on that outer edge of what you're currently capable of. So I think that's kind of what it is. It's just an understanding that when you're growing, feeling like an imposter isn't necessarily, at least from my perspective, a bad thing. Sometimes it's an accurate thing.
It's the old cliche. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. That's not imposter syndrome. That's intellectual humility. I mean, that's just recognizing the world is a very infinitely complex place. Yeah. And for me to be arrogant enough to think I have it all figured out is kind of silly, right? And so I really appreciate it when people can be honest enough with themselves and with those around them to convey that level of vulnerability, that they don't actually have it all figured out. And it doesn't say anything bad about them. In fact, I usually think more highly of that person because they have that level of intellectual humility. That fear of being found out, I really think is the key part of imposter syndrome that can be dangerous because then we spend too much time and energy focusing on maintaining appearances and not being found out rather than learning and growing and developing ourselves and overcoming perhaps the gaps in our skills and our knowledge and our competencies that are going to help us be more successful. But the truth is, we all are continually developing. Nobody has it all figured out. Nobody is perfect at their job. And we find ourselves in new situations, new contexts all the time that require us to continue and learn and stretch and grow. And that's always going to be a little bit uncomfortable because if you're learning, that means you're going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And so to that point, in that way, I completely agree with you that I suppose we're always going to have a little bit of that imposter syndrome floating around in our heads. And I guess the key is to not allow ourselves to ruminate on it too much and allow it to negatively impact how we interact with others. I can acknowledge that I'm building the plane while I'm flying it. I don't have it all figured out. I'm iterating, I'm learning and growing as I go. I can acknowledge that at the same time while conveying to my people that, while I'm not perfect, I'm trying, I'm moving forward, and I hope that they'll do the same. And I'm going to help empower them to do that. And I'm going to support them to do that themselves. I think that creates this dynamic of, a culture of continual learning, a culture of mutual support, mutual accountability and trust, and this simultaneous, intellectual humility around recognizing we don't know it all, we don't have it all figured out, we're going to mess up and learn along the way, and doing it as appropriately vulnerable human beings, that are going to support each other and ultimately, we can still recognize we don't have it all figured out and be confident in our ability to work together to figure it out eventually as we continue to iterate and to grow.
Yeah, I think it requires confidence to admit that. I'll tell you this, John, I think this is important. I had imposter syndrome before I logged on with you. I looked at the show and I was like, this is a very intelligent human that I'm going to be talking with today. I wonder if I'm going to get found out. Am I going to get found out today? That literally went through my mind. And I think this is where the confidence piece comes in. Then you go do it anyway and you see what happens. And what if 99 times out of 100, it goes better than you think? Then you have really good, recent and relevant proof. I went on a show recently, John. This person was a doctor for NASA. And here I am. I didn't go to college. I didn't want to go to college. I'm not a very, I wouldn't say I'm intellectual in studies. And I had that moment of, this is going to go horribly wrong. This is going to go horribly wrong. It went really well. And I think that helped my confidence. And that helps you say, just because you feel like an imposter does not mean you are one. Maybe it's thin air that you haven't breathed before. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I just think that's very important. And then to your point, the vulnerability of saying, this is a culture. The vulnerability of saying, I don't know it all, but I am always focused on learning more. I don't expect you to know it all, but my expectations are that you will be hungry for knowledge and hungry for truth and hungry for productivity and hungry for self-improvement. That's a wonderful rich dynamic of a culture, because you're admitting from the top, I don't want you to think that I know it all, because if you think that I know it all, you're going to think that you should know it all. And if you're walking around here in fear and on eggshells, we're not going to be a very good team. That's not how this is going to grow. So to your point, I agree 100%.
Yeah, we can't be a great team in that sense. And I couldn't help but, think about some of my own experiences, where I've also had that kind of imposter syndrome. So I'm glad you feel more comfortable now. And I
do.
I hope that nobody comes on as a guest and feels too intimidated that way, because I'm just a normal dude, just like anyone else. But that's the reality that I've experienced. As I interact with people that are just incredibly impressive people, they've accomplished so much, so smart, so capable. You have that concern about being found out or not stacking up or in some way coming up short. What I've realized, though, is that the vast majority of people are kind, generous, patient, forgiving. Most people, if you treat them well, they will treat you well, and it's kind of the more rare individual in my experience who's just a jerk, who and usually it's their own stuff, right? It's their own baggage and their own insecurities that are manifesting if they're trying to act all high and mighty and better than you. They're just being a jerk, and they may be more intelligent, they may be more capable, they may have thought of things you haven't thought of, but if they come across that way to you, they're just being a jerk. You don't need to worry about it, and you can move on. And so I try to remember that if I ever am in these situations where I'm feeling intimidated by someone that I'm working with. Again, the vast majority of people are going to be kind and generous and try to have effective interactions with you. And most people want you to be successful. And usually it's a mutually beneficial thing for them to try to help you be successful. It helps them to be more successful. And so, it's not in most people's self-interest to try to undermine those around them. And if they do, they're just a jerk. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not going to end up at the top of the mountain, whatever that mountain is. It's just an attitude thing. I think people drastically under leverage and underappreciate how much a good personality helps you. The personality can get you places that so many other things can't, or I won't say can't, but I think that's a huge thing, is the personality factor is just something that's intangible that oftentimes is underappreciated.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we start to wrap things up for today, perhaps we can transition into this idea of developing our full potential. We've talked around it up to this point, but we've talked about fear and overcoming fear. We've talked about fostering confidence. We've talked about the connection with imposter syndrome. As we are dealing with all these different facets in our brains and our thinking and our interactions with the world around us, ultimately, how does that help us get further along the path towards achieving our full potential? And as a leader, how does that help me then develop the full potential of my people on my team?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it gives us the confidence and the capabilities to go lead our own lives. One of the things that we talk about often is the holistic approach to potential. So leveling up your life overall, but through your love, through your health, and through your wealth. Here's the interesting thing. Most of us are confident in one arena of life. So there are many people who, when they look at their bank account, they feel really good, but their relationships aren't the best, or their health isn't necessarily the best. If you can grow into your potential in all three arenas of life, you're going to be a much more effective leader, because you're actually going to be able to lead by example. When you pour into your health, everything gets better, right? You're more effective, you're more capable, you're more energetic, you're more emotionally regulated, so many things. You're just healthier. When you understand wealth and you understand the economy and you understand money, you can be a better leader that way, because you're going to be more abundant and you won't be as scarce. And you can also pass that on to your team. You can pass that on to everything. And when you go home, whether it's family, intimate partners, friends, and you have very successful relationships in your life, you're going to be a more effective leader, because you're going to be happier. You're going to be more fulfilled. You're going to probably be the kind of person who talks about work-life balance or having life outside of work because you understand having rich dynamic relationships is so important. So I just think becoming the most evolved human being you can be can only rise the tide in every room you're in. And then you're going to lead that way too. You'll be able to lead and say, look, life isn't just about what we do here. When you go home, that matters too. And I just think that's self-improvement. And I think that's personal development. So yeah, I think pouring into your own cup, becoming a better, more holistic leader all around is going to bring the team up just by the law of universe, really.
Yeah. Rising tide lifts all ships.
100%.
That's wonderful. Kevin, this has been a really wonderful conversation. I know at the time it's flown by. I need to let you go here in just a minute. Before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you and find out more about your work, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, I would just say listen to the podcast if you're interested. That's the best place to learn about us. We do 7 episodes a week, so you'll learn very quickly if we're your type of people. Search Next Level University. If you want to reach out to me, you can email me, kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. And I would say do the thing that scares you a little bit, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're all trying to be guides in our own lives, and the guide does the right thing. The guide faces the fear. The guide sends the email. They send the message. They answer the phone. Try to be the guide of your own life, because if you're going to guide others, you first have to learn how to guide yourself to the highest potential.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Kevin and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page. And please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.